I wanted to make something sacred, free, with new perspective, open the mind.
Somehow in Dino's mind put The Elephant Man together with Dune, and he called me and asked me if I would read this book. I don't know quite how that happened. That's my one, in my mind, big failure, but I learned a tremendous amount on that film.
Arrakis. Dune. Wasteland of the Empire. And the most valuable planet in the universe.
Frank Herbert's Dune is considered one of the most influential pieces of literature for science fiction, with its attention to detail, world-building, and thematic content, all of which have permeated modern storytelling since it was published in 1965. However, despite its status, the novel has had a surprisingly hard time coming to the big screen, with an unreleased epic created by a coked-out nutjob.
For me, Dune will be the coming of a god, artistical, cinematographical god.
An infamously faulty adaptation from one of filmmaking's weirdest visionaries. And several other projects which never truly saw the light of day. With the upcoming Denis Villeneuve film slowly inching towards its release date, I wanted to take a look at one of the adaptations that I think is pretty interesting, an adaptation that, while seriously flawed, I think has some serious strengths, especially among its peers. I'm talking about Frank Herbert's Dune, the 3-episode sci-fi miniseries written and directed by John Harrison, which released on the Sci-Fi Channel on December of the year 2000, and became one of the highest-rated programs ever to be broadcast on the channel. In the spirit of film analysis, let's take a look at the strengths and weaknesses of this adaptation of one of the greatest science fiction novels of all time. Like you'll come to see with a lot of the miniseries, the writing is a mixed bag. The novel depicts an immensely complex world with an extraordinary amount of backstory and lore that needs to be explained to the viewer before the actual plot of the novel begins. Character relationships, politics, and environmental logics need to be understood going into the actual story. And in the written text, most of this world building is expressed through the inner thoughts of the characters, which proves complicated to adapt onto the screen. The miniseries uses a similar approach to Lord of the Rings, using an opening narration explaining the absolute bare essentials of the politics and then plunging you into the main events. The characters' inner monologues are replaced by conversations and speeches. While the choice to forgo the narration in favor of spoken word is in my opinion the better option, it also creates the weakness that characters are constantly explaining what's going on.
And Atreides' daughter could have been wed to the Harkonnen heir. The feud between the houses could have been ended.
An old custom, I'm told. Guests ceremoniously splash water on the floor after washing their hands.
A lot of information is explained and repeated constantly in an effort not to lose the viewer, which threatens the immersion of said viewer. It's not only because it's a violation of show don't tell, which I feel in this instance would have been basically impossible, but because most of the time these characters already know the information they're talking about, which makes the majority of these conversations unmotivated by the characters and scene, and thus rather nonsensical in the context. The script is also an incredibly faithful adaptation of the source material, almost scene for scene a recreation of the novel. And this I'm going to consider a failing as well, mainly because the pacing of the novel just doesn't allow for it. Each chapter of the miniseries follows one of the book's 3 parts, and it results in the middle chapter being enormously slow-paced, as not much happens in the novel. The book devotes a lot of this time to explain and explore the lifestyle of the Arrakeen population in detail, which is not properly translated into the miniseries, leaving one very sparse episode. This is ultimately the price the miniseries pays in staying so close to the text, and it creates an uneven pacing which starts and stops and starts again. Tension is built up and then dropped. Villeneuve's choice to split the novel into 2 parts is probably the preferable, as 3 would have left a very sparse narrative and no one wants a repeat of The Hobbit. Again, another mixed bag. Some of the actors are fantastically cast. Saskia Reeves brings a sense of humanity to Lady Jessica that was missing in the Lynch film, adding a more relatable facet that allows us to empathize with her better. Ian McNeice as Baron Harkonnen brings a very exaggerated portrayal of the character to life, and it makes him one of the most entertaining characters without making him less dangerous. But then it also has weaknesses. For example, Alec Newman as Paul. Paul is a very complicated character to portray. He has this beyond his age quality to his character that is very nuanced. While this version of the character is certainly better than Lynch's, he comes off more as whiny during the first half of the story. That said, he does improve as it goes on, so it's not a terrible thing. And that's the common factor with the acting in the show. It either improves or the character just doesn't reappear. For example, Duke Leto. William Hurt is a very talented actor, but I think he doesn't fit this version of Dune. In contrast to the other slightly exaggerated performances, he mostly downplays Leto, talking very quietly and staying serene. The rest of the cast is mostly the same, good but not great. Easily one of the highlights of this adaptation is the cinematography by Vittorio Storaro. The guy shot Apocalypse Now, he knows what he's doing, and here he's given free rein to do what he wants. Dune's aesthetic feels otherworldly, which is perfect for the material. I particularly like how he plays with colored lighting, creating a visual style that's surrealist, which works well with the way Dune feels. I also particularly like how they achieve the effect of the blue eyes in the Fremen population. Most adaptations opt for just blue contact lenses, but the miniseries uses lenses that react to UV light. It's such a bold creative choice that doesn't always work, but really adds to the idea that the blue eyes are a mutation. The one big failing in the visuals of the show are the CG effects, which... God, they look terrible. These were stellar CG effects for the television at the time, but they've aged about as well as a bottle of milk over the past 20 years. I think the best way to have done this at the time would have been to use models and puppets like what Lynch used. Despite its faults, the sandworms look pretty good in Lynch's film, while in this version they remind me a bit too much of the Langoliers. I do wish this show had more of a following, because I'm sure a dedicated fanbase could do some fan edits and create some much better effects with a bit of time. All in all, Frank Herbert's Dune is a good but ultimately very flawed adaptation of the original source material. Held back by its budget, its effects, and its runtime, this adaptation is actually pretty clever in some aspects. Let's look at some lessons we can learn in preparation for Denis Villeneuve's version. As we mentioned previously, splitting the book into 3 parts according to its 3 sections created a bit of a pacing nightmare and seriously undercut the flow of the plot. But going in the other direction, doing just one film leaves too little time to properly explain the novel. I think Denis' decision to split the book into 2 films instead of 3 is ultimately the correct one. In 2 films, Villeneuve has more freedom in choosing how much of that runtime goes to each section of the book, while in the miniseries they were forced to compress the first and third section and extend the middle one. In terms of acting, I think this new adaptation seems to shine. Every actor seems pitch perfect for their role. Timothée Chalamet is absolutely the right choice for Paul, with his wise beyond his years look. Oscar Isaac has already proven he can bring the heat on the acting game. I'm absolutely in love with the choice of Rebecca Ferguson as Lady Jessica. I'm also very interested in Skarsgård as Baron Harkonnen, who looks like a radically different take on the character from previous adaptations, foregoing some of the comical elements of his personality in favor of the purely evil. I'm a tad worried they'll turn out just being big bad evil group with no personality, but I have faith that Villeneuve will deliver a villain that is properly compelling. In terms of the cinematography, I have absolutely no doubts that the new film will look absolutely fantastic. Villeneuve has proven his amazing eye in all his projects, and nailing science fiction cinematography with the visual home run of Blade Runner 2049. Cinematographer Greg Fraser has also proven his science fiction chops himself with Rogue One, which, despite its flaws, is in my opinion very well shot, and lends a distinct visual style to the galaxy far, far away. Hey everyone, I'm so glad to finally be back up and running after a pretty long break, but I'm here to announce that Filmi is here to stay and I'll be working on the next video very soon. I'm watching Dune tonight and I couldn't be more excited. I'll let you know my thoughts most likely in a comment tomorrow. Have a wonderful day, and if you're new here, subscribe. If you're a regular, welcome back. See you around.